Did you know that Europeans were still emptying their chamber pots into the street and spreading disease through their poo-poo? Meanwhile, in the Americas, civilizations had developed aqueducts, waterways, sewage systems that carried human waste away from drinking water. So while Europe was marinating in its own filth, indigenous engineers were designing waterway systems that sustained entire cities. And I'm not just talking about the Aztecs. The Inca had sophisticated aqueducts throughout the Andes. Various Mayan groups had built hydraulic systems that kept their lands from flooding. Even the Moshe and Zapotec people developed early urban waterworks that were centuries ahead of the Europeans. So why don't we ever hear about that in history courses? Well, because, and by the way, welcome back to Forbidden Curriculum, because one of the ways that systems of domination maintain power is by creating dominant narratives that center Eurocentric stories. And one of the things that we learn in critical ethnic studies is about ways to challenge those dominant narratives, which is why they want to ban it, because when you understand how to challenge dominant narratives, then you learn to grow into your power. Did you know that when Hernan Cortez's men first looked at Tenochtitlan, they wrote that it was grander than Seville and that its markets were more complex than anything they'd seen in even Rome? Or did you know that when Pizarro's men arrived in Cajamarca, they were so terrified by the Inca's military power that they literally peed themselves? You don't hear about those stories. Somehow what we're told is that indigenous people were, because it's always were, they're always in the past, never are, never today. We hear that indigenous people were primitive, that they were submissive, that they were glad that the Europeans had arrived. You see, the way that history is written matters. Europeans valued the written word, their type of record keeping. So when they saw codices, like, pictographic record keeping, or quipus, like material record keeping using ropes and knots, when they came across the oral traditions of storytelling, they didn't think of those as official records. They dismissed them as meaningless because they didn't understand them. Then they burned the codices. They executed the oral historians. And then they said, there's no evidence that these people had any history or any culture. Convenient, right? Critical ethnic studies teaches us to question the origins of narratives of power. It teaches us to ask who tells these stories and for what purposes. It also teaches us to consider whose stories are being erased. And when you start seeing through those narratives and really